Let's start with a number, $50 trillion. That's not a typo. That's the estimated value of rare earth metals, critical minerals, and strategic resources buried beneath Greenland's melting ice. Enough lithium, cobalt, neodymium, and graphite to power the next 100 years of military technology, electric vehicles, satellites, and AI systems. This isn't just a fortune. It's the future of war, energy, and global influence. And guess what? America just lost it. Not in a grand battle. Not through invasion. No boots on the ice. No flags planted. No declarations made. No. America lost the Arctic the way empires always lose a future, through arrogance, ignorance, and a complete failure to read the room. While Washington was obsessing over culture wars and chasing shadows of its former glory, Canada quietly outmaneuvered the United States. With no tanks, no threats, and no drama, just credibility, trust, and something America hasn't shown in years, patience. Greenland, the sleeping giant beneath the ice. Greenland was once an afterthought, an icy wilderness known more for its glaciers and its potential. But beneath those glaciers, a treasure chest of unimaginable value. As the ice melts, new possibilities emerge. Trade routes, shipping lanes, and mining opportunities that can shift the global power dynamic overnight. This isn't speculative. It's happening now. And every major power on Earth knows it. The Arctic is the new Middle East, only colder. And this time, America is on the outside looking in. Trump's Greenland blunder. The billionaire who tried to buy a country. Let's rewind to 2019. Donald Trump, in all his real estate tycoon delusion, floated the idea of buying Greenland like it was a resort property in Palm Beach. I just think it's something we talked about, he said, like he was browsing Zillow for continents. Greenland was offended. Denmark was furious. And the world laughed. That wasn't diplomacy. That was geopolitical comedy. And while Trump's offer was dismissed as a joke, it exposed something serious. America's total lack of strategy in the Arctic. No plan, no vision. Just empty bravado wrapped in a MAGA flag. Canada played the long game and won. While Trump was throwing temper tantrums, Canada was busy building relationships. Canada didn't try to buy Greenland. It didn't threaten, coerce, or undermine. Instead, it listened, it partnered. It showed up year after year. If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe. Building quiet alliances, investing in Greenlandic infrastructure, supporting local governance, and offering real pathways to economic independence. It didn't treat Greenland as a pawn. It treated it as a partner. And in the game of 21st century geopolitics, that makes all the difference. Arctic shipping, the new Panama Canal. Here's what the U.S. missed while bickering over bathroom bills and banning books. As the Arctic ice melts, new shipping routes are opening, cutting transit times between Asia and Europe by nearly 40%. That's trillions in future trade. That's control over global logistics. And guess who got there first? Canada. With upgraded ports, new infrastructure, and international partnerships, Canada is now the gatekeeper of the Arctic trade network. The U.S.? It's stuck watching from Alaska, unprepared and increasingly irrelevant. Greenland breaks free, thanks to the minerals below. For decades, Greenland relied on Danish subsidies. But now, with resource extraction ramping up and Canadian support bolstering its infrastructure, Greenland is stepping into its own power. It's no longer a dependency. It's a player. And America's old tactics of control and coercion, dead on arrival. Greenland isn't looking to be bought. It's looking to lead. And Canada is offering the tools to do just that, without demanding fealty in return. This isn't charity. It's strategy. The kind America used to be good at. Washington's blind spot. Domestic chaos, global decline. So where was the U.S. during all of this? Tearing itself apart. Between January 6th, Supreme Court overreaches, and endless gridlock, Washington was too busy fighting over its own democracy to notice the chessboard shifting under its feet. While the GOP tried to cancel drag queens and relitigate the 2020 election, the world moved on. Canada, Europe, China, even Russia, they all made moves in the Arctic, while America was still trying to remember which bathrooms people could use in Florida. NATO fractures, allies pivot, and here's where it gets worse. Canada's Arctic diplomacy didn't just outplay the U.S., it exposed a fracture in NATO unity. European allies, frustrated with American unpredictability, started looking elsewhere. Greenland aligned more closely with Scandinavian partners. Trade routes began flowing through non-American networks, and Arctic Council alliances shifted, quietly but definitively. Russia is thrilled. China is strategizing. Europe is adapting. And America, still pretending it's the center of the universe. Soft power aircraft carriers. Here's a hard truth. You don't win the 21st century with military bases and missile stockpiles. You win it with trust, with alliances, with credibility. Canada proved that in the most resource-rich, strategically important region on Earth. Canada walked in with a handshake, not a helicopter, and walked out with influence that no bomb could buy. That's what power looks like now. And the U.S.? Still stuck in the Cold War, building tanks while the world builds trust. Richard Wolff's warning. Empires fall quietly. Economist Richard Wolff put it best. Empires often fall not with bang, but with bureaucratic denial. And that's exactly what we're watching. The United States, once the architect of post-World War II order, can't even keep up with Canada, a nation it once patronized, now walking circles around in diplomacy, infrastructure, and long-term vision. Wolff's analysis points to systemic decay, a political class too dysfunctional to adapt, a public too distracted to notice, and a foreign policy too arrogant to evolve. Greenland isn't just a missed opportunity. It's a symbol of how far the mighty have fallen and how fast the smart are rising. The new world order, cold, quiet, and Canadian. So what now? The Arctic is no longer a frozen wasteland on the map. It's the front line of a new global contest. And in that contest, Canada just leapfrogged the United States. Not with tanks, not with threats, but with something much more powerful. Patience, credibility, diplomacy, and vision. Greenland made its choice. Europe followed. The shipping routes are shifting. The resource pipelines are rerouting. The U.S. didn't lose the Arctic because someone took it by force. It lost because it wasn't paying attention. Final thought. America, you were warned. This isn't just about Greenland. It's about every emerging front of the future. Climate diplomacy, AI ethics, rare earth extraction, cyber alliances, and post-oil trade routes. Canada played it slow, smart, and steady. The U.S. played it loud, dumb, and distracted. And now, the Arctic is gone. Gone to a new coalition. Gone to those who listened. Gone to the ones who built trust instead of throwing tantrums. And the empire, once so dominant, didn't even show up for the game. America just lost the Arctic without a fight. Greenland wasn't the final prize. It was the opening move, the canary in the geopolitical coal mine, a test of who understands the rules of 21st century power and who's still stuck playing Risk like it's 1985. And in that test, Canada aced the exam, while America barely showed up with a pencil. Because Greenland, for all its wealth and strategic value, is just one domino in a chain of geopolitical shifts happening right now. Shifts that determine who controls supply chains, who owns the future clean tech, and who gets to write the rules for a rapidly changing planet. Guess what? The U.S. isn't the one holding the pen anymore. The U.S. thought it could muscle its way in again. Let's talk about that American mindset. The belief that if you bark loud enough, the world will roll over. That waving the stars and stripes automatically earns you respect. That dropping a few $billion, or bombs, will get you whatever you want. That used to work. Back when the U.S. was the only economic powerhouse, the only superpower, the only show in town. But this isn't 1991. It's not even 2008. This is 2025. And countries like Canada, Greenland, and even smaller Pacific and Arctic nations have learned something crucial. You don't have to obey America anymore. You don't have to sell your land. You don't have to surrender your autonomy. You don't have to jump at the sound of Washington's voice. Not when you have alternatives. When other powers treat you like an equal, not a resource-rich playground. Enter the new players. Multipolar mayhem. While Washington was clinging to old-school dominance, the world diversified. China built influence with trade and infrastructure. Europe leveraged diplomacy and green technology. Russia exploited chaos with disruption and cyber warfare. And Canada? Canada carved out a niche with precision diplomacy and a focus on Arctic stewardship that made it look like the adult in the room. And now, the U.S. is standing on the sidelines of the most important power shift since the Cold War, watching, frustrated, confused, because it turns out being feared doesn't translate to being trusted. And in the New World Order, trust is currency. The silent revolution, Greenland's economic independence. Greenland didn't just resist U.S. advances. It transformed itself. Once relying on Danish subsidies, Greenland used mineral wealth to build something Washington couldn't comprehend, a self-sustaining economy. And Canada? Canada supported that vision, helped it grow, trained its officials, provided infrastructure investments, and opened doors to European trade networks. The result? Greenland is no longer begging for a seat at the table. It is the table, a mineral powerhouse, a trade corridor, a sovereign voice in Arctic governance. And most shockingly of all, it achieved that without ever firing a shot, just by choosing the right friends, the right allies, the right approach. America's reputation, from global leader to global liability. Here's what nobody in D.C. wants to admit. The rest of the world doesn't look at America the way it used to. Not after the coups, the shutdowns, the January 6th insurrection, the Supreme Court chaos, the culture war insanity, the refusal to lead on climate, the backtracking on international agreements. America doesn't look like a leader anymore. It looks like a reality show, a circus, a warning. Meanwhile, Canada, calm, competent, and consistent, showed up in Greenland and proved something shocking. A nation can lead without dominating. And that is the new blueprint. Arctic militarization? Too little, too late. So now, predictably, the Pentagon is sounding the alarm. Suddenly they're pumping billions into Arctic bases, talking about sovereignty, deploying submarines and patrol aircraft, flexing muscles that should have been used 10 years ago. But here's the problem. You can't bomb your way into a friendship. You can't militarize your way into a diplomatic alliance. And Greenland? It remembers who showed up when it mattered, who asked what it needed, not what it could be forced to give, who treated it like an equal. It wasn't the United States. So build all the bases you want, Washington. The real battles have already been won, and not by you. Canada's masterstroke, controlling the narrative. Let's talk psychology. While America was busy shouting into the void, Canada did something smarter. It controlled the narrative. Instead of flashy announcements or viral headlines, it embedded itself in Arctic research initiatives, climate collaborations, indigenous partnerships, and trade logistics. It didn't demand a spotlight. It became the spotlight. So by the time anyone realized what was happening, Canada already had Greenland, Iceland, Norway, and segments of the EU aligned on Arctic governance. The pipelines were flowing. The deals were signed. The alliances were sealed. And America? Still scrambling to catch up to a race it didn't know had started. The ice melts. So does American influence. Here's the brutal poetry of it all. As the Arctic ice melts, so does America's illusion of control. Every glacier that retreats opens a new route. Every shipping lane that emerges shifts economic gravity. Every mine that gets activated feeds supply chains the U.S. doesn't control. And Washington, so used to being conductor of global commerce, is now watching the Arctic train pass it by. From the platform, this isn't just a tactical loss. It's a generational collapse in influence. Because once those alliances are built, once the infrastructure is locked in and the political trust established, you don't get to snap your fingers and say, "We're ready to lead now." The world has moved on, and America didn't get the memo. Richard Wolff was right. The fall is inevitable. Economist Richard Wolff, with his trademark bluntness, warned us. Empires collapse not when they're weak, but when they're too proud to admit they're weak. And that's what we're seeing. America can't admit it was outmaneuvered, can't admit that soft power outflanked its hard power, can't admit that trust outperformed threats. So it'll lash out, call it unfair, accuse others of betrayal. But deep down, the truth is unavoidable. Canada played chess. The U.S. played checkers and lost the board. Final act, the new global power equation. Let's put it all together. Greenland holds the keys to rare earths. Canada holds the keys to Arctic infrastructure. Europe is shifting its loyalties. Russia is exploiting the gaps. China is mapping the next moves. And America? It's stuck waving flags and repeating slogans from a bygone era. The power equation has changed. It's no longer about who has the biggest military. It's about who has the trust of emerging nations, the foresight to invest early, the humility to listen, the patience to build, the credibility to lead. And on every one of those fronts, America failed. Canada delivered. Final words, a cold future for a warmongering nation. So here we are. The Arctic is melting. The minerals are flowing. The alliances are forming. And the once mighty superpower is watching, shouting from the sidelines, demanding a seat at the table it didn't help build. That's not strategy. That's desperation. Greenland didn't reject the U.S. because it hates America. It rejected the U.S. because it watched the chaos unfold back home, because it saw the dysfunction, the disrespect, the decline. And it made a different choice, a better choice. It chose the future. It chose trust. It chose Canada. And America? It just lost the Arctic. Without a fight. You can't sanction glaciers. You can't invade a tectonic shift. You can't drone strike your way into relevance when the world has moved on. And that's exactly what happened. For decades, American policymakers treated the Arctic like some frozen appendix to real geopolitics. A non-factor, a sideshow, a remote, irrelevant chunk of ice and rocks and polar bears. They laugh when climate scientists warn of melting ice caps. They ignore when indigenous voices call for sovereignty. They scoffed when small nations sought a seat at the Arctic Council. And while they mocked, Canada planned, quietly, strategically, with every boring meeting and slow negotiation, Canada stacked the deck, because that's how influence is really built. Not through sound bites, but through spreadsheets. Not with shock and awe, but with soft hands and a long game. Washington's late wake-up call. Now, suddenly, D.C. is awake. Congress is holding emergency hearings on Arctic sovereignty. Defense officials are using words like encroachment and resource insecurity. There are plans. Oh, there are always plans now. Billions allocated, new initiatives unveiled, flags waving from remote bases in Alaska. But it's all reaction, not strategy. It's panic, not leadership. Because the U.S. didn't lose the Arctic in some dramatic showdown. It lost it while scrolling Twitter, fighting itself, and pretending that shouting freedom would stop the planet from rotating. And when it finally looked up from its self-inflicted chaos, it found Canada standing tall at the top of the world, flanked by Greenland, backed by Europe, and trusted by partners who had grown tired of American theatrics. Greenland's coming-of-age moment. Let's take a second to appreciate Greenland's arc in this story. Once viewed as little more than a strategic gas station for Denmark and the U.S. military, Greenland finally claimed its voice. Not through war, not through revolution, but through empowerment, by harnessing its natural resources and finding allies that didn't treat it like a colony. Canada didn't try to buy Greenland. It didn't laugh at its autonomy. It invested in people, in infrastructure, in institutions. And now, Greenland has leverage. It chooses who it works with. It negotiates on equal terms. And when the U.S. comes knocking, it doesn't come begging. It comes bargaining. This is what economic independence looks like. This is what self-determination sounds like. And this is what power in the 21st century looks like. Why America's old playbook doesn't work anymore. Let's break it down simply. The Cold War tactics? Irrelevant. The post-9/11 imperial playbook? Burned out. The neoliberal trade deals with fine print that screws over allies? Exposed. The world knows better now. The facade is gone. America used to say, "We're here to help." Now it says, "Do what we say or we'll cut you off." And the rest of the world says, "We're good, Thanks. Meanwhile, Canada, usually mocked for being too nice, too slow, too polite, proved something radical. Politeness isn't weakness. It's strategy. Because when the U.S. came with threats, Canada came with listening. When America offered coercion, Canada offered collaboration. And guess who got the contract? Guess who got the mine? Guess who got the Arctic shipping corridor? Not the country that tried to buy Greenland like a Manhattan condo. The Arctic Council's quiet coup. Behind closed doors at Arctic Council meetings, the tone has shifted. Where once America could dominate the room with military might and legacy clout, now it's awkward. Its authority is questioned. Its motives distrusted. Its participation spotty at best. And while Washington flails, Canada has become the steady hand, the one leading climate talks, the one driving infrastructure plans, the one hosting multinational energy summits. Because in the modern world, credibility is everything. And America's is threadbare. 1 minute, it's in the Paris Agreement. The next, it's out. One administration builds bridges. The next burns them down. No consistency. No trust. No reliability. And the Arctic doesn't have time for tantrums. China's watching. And laughing. Oh, and let's not forget the silent observer in the back of the room. China. They've been studying this Arctic debacle like a doctoral thesis in American decline. They saw Trump's clownish attempt to buy Greenland. They saw Biden's delayed response to Arctic engagement. They saw Congress bicker and freeze budgets while Canada built fiber optic lines in Nunavut and sustainable ports along the Northwest Passage. And now, China knows. They know that soft power wins. They know that the next superpower won't conquer land. It'll earn trust. And they're learning from Canada. Canada just gave the world a masterclass in 21st century dominance. And China, taking notes. America, still screaming into the void. The empire doesn't know it's over. You want the most dangerous kind of superpower? It's not the one that knows it's in decline. It's the one that doesn't. And that's where the United States is right now, wandering through a delusional fog, still thinking every summit needs its approval. Every deal requires its blessing. Every region must bow to its interests. But here's the truth. No one's waiting for America anymore. Not Greenland. Not Canada. Not the Arctic nations. Not the rising powers across the globe. They're building their own networks, forging their own paths, creating a new world order where America is just another seat at the table, if it even gets one. And maybe that's the hardest pill for Washington to swallow. The world doesn't need it like it used to. A glacier doesn't care if you're offended. There's something poetic about America losing the Arctic, because for all its noise, its pride, its grandstanding, it never respected the ice. Never saw the Arctic as a place with people, culture, identity. Just a strategic chess piece. Just a slab of ice to plant a flag on. Just a resource pit to be looted. But the Arctic is alive. It's melting. It's shifting. It's opening new frontiers. And it's remembering who stood by it when it mattered. Spoiler alert, it wasn't the U.S. So what now? Here's what comes next. Greenland becomes a global leader in rare earth supply. Canada cements itself as the Arctic gatekeeper. Arctic trade bypasses U.S. ports. NATO scrambles to keep up with fractured loyalties. China and Russia maneuver around the gaps America left wide open. And America starts throwing money at the problem, years too late, like a washed-up star trying to buy relevance on a show it no longer headlines. The script is flipped. The student outwitted the teacher. The junior partner outmaneuvered the global giant. Canada didn't just win the Arctic. It rewrote the rules. The ice is gone. So is the illusion. This is more than a loss. This is a reckoning. The ice is vanishing, exposing not just minerals, but truths long buried. That power without purpose is hollow. That alliances without trust are weak. That dominance without humility always collapses. The U.S. thought it owned the future, but it never even owned the moment. And now, the cold, hard fact of geopolitics are as clear as the melting Arctic waters. Canada won the Arctic. Greenland chose independence. The world moved on. And America, it lost everything. Without a fight,